When Married with Children first flickered onto television screens on April 5, 1987, almost nobody expected it to survive. Critics dismissed it, executives doubted it, and the polished world of network television wanted nothing to do with its loud, messy humor. Yet the audiences felt something entirely different. Week after week, viewers tuned in to watch a deeply dysfunctional Chicago family stumble through life with spectacular, unapologetic chaos. What followed was 11 seasons, 259 episodes, and a permanent place in television history. But behind the laughter lay a story far more complicated than anything that ever played out on screen. The show was created by Michael G. Moy and Ron Levitt for the then-fledgling Fox network, and it holds the distinction of being Fox's very first primetime series. The network gave its creators a simple mandate: be as outrageous as the big networks would never allow. The early working title was not The Cosbys, a deliberate declaration of war against the wholesome, sanitized image of the ideal American family. Fox CEO Barry Diller had his doubts from the start, and critics were divided throughout the show's original run. But none of that stopped it from becoming one of the most talked-about series of its era. The theme song, Love and Marriage, performed by Frank Sinatra, added an extra layer of irony. It sounded warm and classic, while everything happening inside the Bundy household was anything but. At the center of it all was Al Bundy, played by Ed O'Neill. Al was a former high school football star forever frozen in the memory of scoring 4 touchdowns in a single game for Polk High. That triumph was his peak, and he knew it. Now he spent his days selling women's shoes to ungrateful customers, nursing a deep resentment toward life, while sitting on his couch watching fictional shows like Psycho Dad and clutching a stash of old magazines. He complained constantly, battled the bills, and clung to his ancient 1972 Dodge Dart as if it were the last dignified thing in his possession. Yet for all his bitterness, Al had a stubborn loyalty to his family. When things got genuinely bad, he showed up. Peggy Bundy, brought to life by Katie Segal, was AL's perfect opposite in the worst possible way. She refused to cook, clean, or hold down a job. She spent AL's money on shopping sprees and long afternoons watching talk shows. She mocked his career, his paycheck, and his failures with gleeful precision, dragging the family deeper into financial chaos at every turn. Her best friend and neighbor Marcy was a constant companion in making AL's life more difficult, and her extended family, particularly her mother, were sources of endless torture for her exhausted husband. Kelly Bundy, played by Christina Applegate, was the family's pretty but famously dim-witted daughter. She forgot things almost instantly, twisted simple words into nonsense, and dated an endless parade of young men who sent Al into fits of quiet despair. Her younger brother Bud, played by David Faustino, was sharper and more ambitious, though his grand plans for impressing girls almost always collapsed spectacularly. Kelly and Bud insulted each other with genuine enthusiasm, but beneath the bickering was a real bond. They showed up for each other when the trouble became too big to handle alone. That mix of pettiness and loyalty was what made the Bundys feel human. Next door lived Marcy, played by Amanda Burse, whose evolution from Marcy Rhodes to Marcy Darcy tracked the changing landscape of the show itself. A banker, a feminist, and a committed environmentalist, she founded an organization called FONG, Feminists Against Neanderthal Guys, as a direct response to AL's own group, No Ma'am. Her first husband, Steve Rhodes, played by David Garrison, was a stiff and cautious man who adored his Mercedes-Benz and kept Marcy from touching it. He eventually left the show during season 4 to become a forest ranger, reappearing sporadically before settling into a role as dean at Bud's College. His replacement, Jefferson Darcy, played by Ted McGinley, was a smooth-talking charmer with no job, no income, and a talent for distracting Marcy with his looks whenever trouble arose. Hints were dropped across several episodes that Jefferson may have had a shadowy past as a CIA operative, though nothing was ever confirmed. Ironically, the lazy, easygoing Jefferson became one of AL's closest friends. The production moved several times across its long run, beginning at the ABC Television Center in Los Feliz for the first 2 seasons, where real studio audiences filled the room and sharpened the timing of every joke. Seasons 3 through 8 were recorded at Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, and the final 3 seasons relocated to Sony Pictures Studios in Culver City. These shifts kept the show fresh and prevented it from growing stale. The company behind it also changed hands midway through season 2, when Yelpy Communications under Columbia Pictures Television took over from Embassy Communications. Despite all the movement, the machine kept running. The critics never fully warmed to it. The first season carried a Metacritic score of 58 out of 100, landing squarely in mixed territory. Howard Rosenberg of the Los Angeles Times praised the casting of the Bundys, but found the Rhodes characters underdeveloped and warned that the satire was heavy-handed. Tom Shales of the Washington Post was far harsher, calling the same premiere episode nasty-minded, overacted, and poorly cast. John J. O'Connor of the New York Times called the series loud, coarse, and vulgarly blue-collar, comparing it unfavorably to older working-class comedies like All in the Family. None of it mattered to the audience, who kept watching in growing numbers. Off-camera, the set produced its own brand of chaos. Perhaps no guest star embodied that chaos more completely than comedian Sam Kinison, who appeared in Season 4 as a guardian angel. On his very first day, Kinison pulled down his pants and mooned the entire cast and crew. On the second day, he arrived late and brought strippers to set as an apology. They proceeded to serve lunch, transforming the workplace into something entirely different from a professional television production. His conflicts with director Jerry Cohen escalated to genuinely frightening levels, reportedly including a confrontation involving a firearm. Kinison had actually been considered for the role of Al Bundy before Ed O'Neill was cast, just as Roseanne Barr had been considered for Peggy. Creator Michael Moy later admitted relief that neither was hired, explaining that established comedians come in with their character already formed, leaving little room for collaboration or direction. Controversy followed the show beyond the set. A Michigan woman named Terry Ricalta became the most vocal public critic, having watched an episode with her children that included content she found deeply offensive. She appeared on talk shows and launched a boycott campaign, contacting Fox directly and demanding advertisers pull their support. In one phone call, she ended up arguing with a writer named Marcy Vosberg, believing she was speaking to a network executive. She later admitted that had she known the truth, she might have handled it differently. The boycott, however, backfired completely. The negative attention brought the show to people who had never heard of it, turning outrage into free advertising. Ratings climbed. Ed O'Neill was not initially enthusiastic about joining the series. His agents told him it was a terrible show on a questionable new network. He read the script anyway and fell in love with it. Christina Applegate's first reaction was that the material was disgusting, but after watching the pilot, she changed her mind entirely. What she brought to Kelly Bundy was also largely her own invention. The character had originally been written as a tough biker girl, but Applegate had a different vision. Inspired by a figure from the 1981 documentary The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years, she went to the wardrobe department and argued for a complete reinvention, big hair, white lycra, and the rock video aesthetic of the era. The team listened, and Kelly Bundy, as fans came to know her, was born. That reinvention came at a personal cost. Applegate has spoken openly about the eating disorder she developed during her years on the show. She was 17 when it began, and the pressure of being treated as the show's sex symbol from such a young age took a lasting toll. She hid her struggle entirely, eating in private, sometimes in airplane bathrooms during overseas trips with the cast, too ashamed to be seen eating in front of colleagues. Katie Sagal, reflecting on those years, acknowledged that Applegate was scrutinized intensely and placed in increasingly revealing costumes throughout the show's run. The environment, Sagal admitted, was often misogynistic. The tension behind the scenes extended further. Sagal herself described the atmosphere as one where no one felt entirely safe, a sarcastic and cynical group where turning your back could mean becoming someone else's subject. Applegate recalled being able to hear her colleagues speaking poorly about her from her dressing room just seconds after she had left the set. For a young actress building her career in the national spotlight, it was a bruising experience she carried quietly for years. Ed O'Neill and Amanda Bearse had their own long-running conflict, which O'Neill publicly addressed in early 2024. The rupture began during a TV Guide cover shoot when Bearse and David Garrison were told they would not be included. They asked O'Neill, as the lead, to go to co-creator Ron Levitt and push for the full cast to appear. O'Neill refused, reasoning that the cast was lucky to have the cover at all, and that making demands might cost them the opportunity entirely. Bearse never forgave the decision, and in 2010, O'Neill openly expressed frustration that she had not invited him to her wedding. He now says he regrets his bluntness and should have at least appeared to fight for his colleagues, even if the outcome would have been the same. The show's cancellation arrived with the same cold impersonality that had characterized much of its relationship with the industry. O'Neill found out not from a network executive or a producer, but from a young groom and his bride who had just driven into the bed and breakfast where he was staying. The couple recognized him, congratulated themselves on meeting Bundy, and then broke the news they had heard on the radio. O'Neill stayed gracious, shared champagne with the newlyweds, and walked back inside. He received no farewell gift from the network. He noted with dry humor that the cast of The Golden Girls had received Mercedes-Benz at the end of their run. Applegate learned the news through a chain of second-hand sources, a friend of a friend who worked with her assistant. No one called. No meeting was held. It simply ended. Yet the show did not disappear. In 2008, long after its final episode aired, Married with Children appeared on Entertainment Weekly's list of television classics. In May 2022, news broke that an animated revival was in development. The Bundys had endured. O'Neill once reflected on the strange way fans approached him over the years, always saying he reminded them of a brother, a father, a friend, never themselves. Nobody wanted to admit they were Al Bundy, but everyone recognized something true in him. The show was never respected by its industry peers, never rewarded with the awards it consistently failed to receive, but it captured something real about working-class life that more polished shows were too careful to touch. That truth, messy and uncomfortable as it was, is exactly why people are still watching.